The Heat got big contributions off their bench and from behind a three-point line to help secure their second straight win over the Atlanta Hawks, give them a little cushion as they try to keep climbing their way up the standings. We break down big nights from Victor Oladipo, Caleb Martin, and Duncan Robinson, and wonder, is Miami's three-point shooting finally back? All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making us your first listen every day and for subscribing. The Miami Heat get a 130 to 128 win over the Atlanta Hawks to sweep this home series, a needed win to hold the Hawks off in the standings, and an uncharacteristic win for the Heat. The Heat did it with offense. Specifically, they did it with their shooting, their second highest scoring night of the season with 130 points. 16 made three-pointers to shoot 55% from distance. It's also the second highest scoring total of their season. Their second highest, in addition to that, the second most that they've outscored an opponent from three-point range this season. They outscored the Hawks by 21 points from three-point range. They needed to do it that way to come back from 15 points down in that first half after a 43-point first quarter by the Hawks. David, we've been waiting for this positive regression from three-point range for 65 games now. At least for a night, it feels like we've got it. But even if we zoom out to the last three games, even the last 5 games, really, the Heat are trending in the right direction. 40% overall from three in the last 5 games. The last 3 games, 55% tonight, 37% the game before, and then 48% in that game against the Knicks. So again, is this the positive regression that we've been waiting for?
I want to say yes. I think I'm a little burnt by this team, unfortunately. I just don't know that I can fully endorse what we've seen over the last handful of games and say, yeah, I'm ready to say that three-point shooting is back. I think it is normalizing a little bit. And I'm not sure that we can explain it either. It's not like there's been a resurgence from any one particular player or even a handful of players. It just seems like slowly, steadily, everybody's just kind of finding their rhythm a little bit. Tyler Herro's had some big games. Tonight it was Victor Oladipo, Caleb Martin, Duncan Robinson coming off the bench.
There is one thing that I'm looking at. It's the shot selection. And they've actually been shooting fewer three-pointers recently. They only took 29 threes tonight, 35 the game before against the Hawks, 25 the game before that, and 29 the game before that. So instead of kind of hitting that 40 three-point attempt benchmark, they've been hovering closer to 30 lately. I don't think that that's on purpose. I think that they're actively trying to get to better looks. Cooper Moorhead from MiamiHeat.com, who does great work there, was the one that asked Spo about that after the game. And he said, is there a correlation to that? And Spo said he probably not, and that he would even ask for maybe 3 or 4 more three-pointers tonight that he thought that the Heat passed up. But I do think that they're being a little bit more selective in how they're getting those threes and a little bit more purposeful in the drive and paint. I think selective. I think it's, instead of being like swing, swing, shoot, it's more like drive, swing, swing, shoot. I think their drive and kick game has gotten better, in other words.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't even know that there's a corollary to that either. I'm not sure exactly where that ties into as far as one player being much more effective. And before this recent stretch of hot shooting, there were plenty of open opportunities, and you could limit your shooting opportunities to 25 to 30 attempts per game. But if you only hit 5, 6 or 7 of those, you're still shooting at a pretty subpar percentage there. So the shot selection is nice. I'm glad that they're limiting them. I still think if they can shoot 40% while maintaining that 40 attempt benchmark, that's ideal. Maybe that's
now we're talking about last year's number 1 seed, aren't we?
Yeah, well, it's the exact same roster minus PJ Tucker. So I don't see why they can't shoot that. Again, there seems to be this incredible drop off. We've talked about it a number of times.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think
that drop off was inexplainable, and this positive regression is unexplainable. And we've just been waiting for, these are good 3-point shooters. Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, they're not. I don't think that they're elite 3-point shooters. Maybe with the exception of Duncan Robinson, because I still think, despite the averages, he's an elite 3-point shooter.
Agreed.
But they're good 3-point shooters. Caleb Martin, these are good 3-point shooters. And
They shouldn't shoot 30% or worse.
Right, exactly. Or even sub 35%. These guys are like 36, 37%, I think, is right where they're going to be. And in a good year, maybe you get to 39, 40%, which is where all of them basically were last year.
Right.
So we've just been waiting for this regression. And after 65 games, it was like, I guess it's never going to come. And then it started happening all of a sudden. So yeah, like you, I don't trust it. I have no idea. Would I be surprised if they go out against Cleveland on Wednesday and shoot 20%? No, I would not. Would I be surprised if they shot 40% again after they shot 55% tonight? No, I would not. I have no idea what to expect from this team anymore. I do wonder how much of the lineup change has to do with this, because I wanted to ask Spo this after the game, and I didn't get a chance to get to my question, but I wanted to ask him, like, that decision after the All-Star break to go with Kevin Love in that starting lineup, right, and bring Caleb and start bringing Caleb Martin off the bench. And then when Kevin Love wasn't available tonight because of a rib contusion, to go with Max Strus over Caleb Martin. Are you willingly sacrificing a little bit of your top 5 defense in order to lift the offense out of the bottom 5 of the NBA? We know that Spo would say, I will never sacrifice defense, right? But I do think that there's something to it. And I wonder if that kind of strategy and that emphasis and that messaging is kind of trickling down in some way. And by starting with a bona fide shooter like Kevin Love or Max Strus at power forward, that does open up the offense a little bit. And they played tonight with 3 shooters on the floor, basically at all times around one of Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo.
It's an interesting point. I don't know how much it ultimately matters. Again, we kind of tend to obsess over the starter versus the bench player, but Caleb played a significant amount of time tonight, and he had incredible offensive possessions when Trae Young and DeJounte Murray started getting those incredible looks at the basket in the first quarter. Caleb came in for Max and wound up becoming a much more impactful defender at the point of attack. So we saw it kind of even out over the course of the 48-minute game. I don't know that there's something to be said about a sacrifice of the defense, knowing that the defense is going to play later on. Like if you take the hit with the starting lineup and try to get that boost early on, and look, in the first quarter, they wound up shooting pretty well from 3-point range. It was 5 of 7 or something. Yeah, 5 of 7 from the first quarter, and then that kind of maintained over the course of the game. Max started getting hot. Duncan was able to knock down some incredible shots. I know we'll talk about him in the next segment, but he had a real nice impact off the bench. Victor looked good, but the defense, to your point, that all also evens out. Whether it's getting stronger defensive presence off from your bench, which was virtually non-existent all season long, I think it's normalized. This is what it should be. Even if you take a little bit of a hit with the starting lineup because you're starting a subpar defender in either Strus or Kevin Love, it kind of evens out over the course of the game, because you're getting a much more energized, impactful, and engaged version of Caleb Martin than what we have seen for most of the season.
Yeah, I think you and I are saying the same thing. I think that the defense evens out. I think they trust their defense to kick it into gear, because the first 4 minutes of this game, that defense was terrible. Like the Hawks.
I know. We
Hawks
talked about this via text.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad. Like the rotations weren't crisp. They were not. They when they would get into that zone, there was no press. They were kind of just going through the switches and then just going through the zone motions. And I was like, no, there's no like energy. There's no oomph with this defense the way that the Heat usually play with oomph. And that didn't exist. But I do think that the Heat trust themselves to be able to call a timeout and say, all right, hey guys, tighten up on defense, fix it, play with more energy, play with more focus. Be more crisp there, be stronger at the point of attack. And then they can go out and do that. Whereas with the 3-point shooting, Spo does not feel like he can call a timeout and be like, hey guys, start making these shots maybe. Like that hasn't worked all year. And so maybe there is something to say about, hey, and look, I have no idea if this is Spo's thought process ultimately, but hey, if we can get out and build some momentum with the if we can get a couple threes to fall early on, then maybe everything else will just follow that. Because obviously the defense is not going to power the offense to the degree that we need it to. Because as many turnovers and rebounds as this team can get, and it did get, it didn't matter. Like at the end of the day, they would win a couple of games, but the offense was still bad, like just terrible, like literally worse in the league among non-tanking teams was where the offense was. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. And so to try to figure it out. I understand, like, maybe they're like, all right, let's just sacrifice a little bit of defense early, knowing that when we need to kick it into high gear, we can. But if we can get some just flow and just some wind under our sails offensively, that'll pay big dividends down the stretch. And I thought in this Hawks game, despite that defense being so bad in those first 4 or 5 minutes, they still went small. They still started the second half small with Max Strus at power forward. And ultimately, that strategy won out. And I think Spo is looking at the big picture there. You mentioned Caleb Martin. He was huge off the bench. Victor Oladipo, huge contributions off the bench tonight. That was also part of the winning formula. The bench maybe overall finally beginning to take shape, and a big Spo decision could be the reason why. We'll tell you what it is next. But David, first, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Built. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you've got to try a Built Bar. So many people making resolutions, trying to eat a little healthier throughout the year, but you don't want to necessarily sacrifice taste. Well, guess what? You don't have to, because Built Bars are healthy and they're actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You won't think they're good for you, but they're perfect for maintaining a healthy diet. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it. I don't know that anybody does, but you don't want to look too deeply into that, because what you're getting is great taste without sacrificing any of the nutrients that you might be looking for. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box anymore. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars by going to Built.com. You can still do that, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puffs, or if you go to Sam's Club, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie, batter, and churro. You'll thank me later. And of course, you can always go to Built.com, but get your Built Bars today.
Locked On Heat is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please do subscribe. It's a Heat win, David, which means it's time to get in the kitchen and whip up some credit cookies. 2 straight wins, a big win that separates the Heat 2 games in the loss column ahead of the Hawks for that number 7 seed now, or 3 games. I'm sorry. What is it? Is it 2 games or 3 games in the loss column?
2.5 games over the Hawks in the column.
Okay, perfect. And those back-to-back wins over the Hawks, obviously huge, but let's hand out some credit cookies. You want to start with Caleb Martin there?
Yeah, the official cookie of the state of Georgia, peanut butter and chocolate chip cookies. So I think Caleb Martin absolutely deserves his fair share of them. Yeah, it's
peanut butter chip or peanut butter cookie with chocolate.
Peanut butter cookie with chocolate chips in it.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong there. But the Hawks aren't getting any cookies tonight. The Heat, however, should get at least 10. Great game from Caleb. Just to come in there again and provide that incredible level of defense, attacking in just the right ways, acrobatic drive to the hoop, flourishing with dunks, his 3-point shooting, 2 of 2 from behind the arc, a big reason why Miami's percentage was so high, the highest percentage of the season. Just great overall game from him. And I love Spo's comments after the game, comparing Caleb Martin to Shawn Marion, the Matrix.
The Matrix. So what does that make Caleb Martin? What does that make? Because if Shawn Marion is the Matrix, then Caleb Martin is like,
I don't know.
What's the sequel to the Matrix?
Revolutions or something like that.
Resurrections, the Matrix.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, whatever. Who cares? They all sucked after the first one. But the point is, maybe we'll call him the blue pill or something.
It was the Matrix. What'd you call it? The blue pill?
The blue pill.
That's good. The Matrix, and then you had the Matrix Reloaded, and then you had the Matrix Revolutions, and then you had the Matrix Resurrections, which came out like 18 years after.
Oh, that's
right.
In
2021. I didn't even know that happened.
I remember they brought the gang back together, minus Lawrence Fishburne. He was like, "Nah, I'm done with that sort of thing."
Can we? There's no Lawrence. So who they? What? It doesn't matter. Do we call them like Revolutions Reloaded? What do we go with?
Nothing. I don't. No. Caleb Martin strikes me as a guy who just. Yeah, he strikes me as.
He was wearing sunglasses He was like wearing Matrix style sunglasses in the post game press conference. Like,
then go with Neo, right? That's like Neo or Orpheus. I don't know. Maybe go with Orpheus or something like that. That was.
I like Neo. I like Neo because he's the star, right? He's like the hero. He's the main guy. Keanu Reeves. That's Neo, right?
That is, yes.
Okay, so all right. Neo, Caleb.
I can't believe we've been taking 5 minutes into the show and talking about.
I think this is the most important thing I think this is the most important thing we've covered so far.
We have to get his thumbs up, though. We have to get his approval.
I'll ask him next time. The key decision that I think Spo made, and it was such an interesting one, and I I remember thinking before the game, and I tweeted this, just because Kevin Love was out, don't just in Sharpie just slide
Right.
Caleb Martin back into that starting lineup.
I've never seen that from Spo.
Right. Like Spo is different with his lineups. And I think a lot of coaches would still just be like, hey, Caleb's our best player coming off the bench. We're out a starter. Just move that player back into the starting lineup. And I think that's the easy decision. And it's a decision most coaches would go with. But Spo is not most coaches when it comes to these rotations, for better or worse. Right. And I actually didn't think that the Max Strus decision was the right one based on how the defense started in the game. I was like, this is not working, guys. But he stuck with it. And he's sticking with it because Caleb Martin has been so good for them off the bench lately. 21 points tonight on 6 of 9 shooting, 4 rebounds, a couple of assists. He was huge. And I think with knowing that we keep talking about the offense for the Miami Heat, but the other part of Miami's problem in the first 60 plus games this year was that its bench was one of the first 6 or one of the last 6 or 7 ranked in the NBA. Right. And so you needed to get some sort of lift from your bench too. And Caleb Martin was such a big part of last year's successful bench that moving him back in there, and then Spo was asked about the decision to keep bringing Caleb off the bench, and basically, I forget who asked it, but they asked it like, hey, is this because he's been playing well off the bench? And Spo goes, yes, that's exactly why it is. And that was the answer. And I'm like, yeah. And like that, and he goes, that's my thought process. I was like, all right, good thought process.
Yeah, if it works, don't fix it, right? Don't bring it. I don't understand. He's just been so good. He was starting to break down a little bit, and we had talked about this even before the Kevin Love acquisition. I wondered whether or not Caleb might benefit from coming off the bench because he was starting to look a little broken down and not being as impactful. I know I've beaten this drum many times, but last year, every time he played felt like a memorable 5, 10, 15-minute spurt from him because he just brought this incredible energy, attacking the passing lane, diving to the rim, making that baseline cut for an alley-oop.
That baseline cut was open all night. I was shocked. Like, that has to be on the scouting report for the Hawks. It can't not. It's been 2 years of Caleb Martin making that same. That's his job in the offense, is to slide along that baseline and wait for that pocket to open when the defense presses up on Jimmy or Bam right around 15 feet. That's his whole job on offense, is to make that baseline cut. And it's like the Hawks had no idea that he was going to do that. He got it like 3 or 4 times. Like Caleb Martin scored 10 straight points in that game. And it like 3 of those baskets, I think, were just that baseline cut. I was shocked that the Hawks did not have that scouted. It was shocking.
Not a very good defensive team. I mean, a lot of energy, fast pace, etc. Great shooting on occasion, great passing for Trae Young.
Sure.
And yet defensively, there's definite holes and a lack of awareness. And maybe it comes with age, maybe. I don't know exactly. That's, go listen to Brad over at Locked On Hawks. I'm sure he has an explanation for it. But
I'm sure he's
Caleb,
very happy with his performance.
Finding those seams and just, I don't know, maybe his role changes a little bit, not necessarily playing the PJ-like role of having to camp out for that corner 3 and much more aware. You know what? Now I have a little bit more spacing. I don't think anything has changed dramatically where it's like the baseline cut isn't there if he starts, but he's attacking with more energy now, and he just looks healthy.
Well, he's playing against worse players too. And he said that after the game. He's like, I'm going against bench guys now a little bit more often. He's still in the closing lineup against the starters in the most high stakes moments, and that's a very important thing for Caleb Martin to do. But he is playing against like the worst players in their rotation, an opponent's rotation. I think that is a factor. So in terms of cookies, should we give 4, 3? I don't know.
Ooh.
Is that too much?
No, I think 3 is good. I think Victor Oladipo certainly deserves at least as many.
Yeah, 6 of 12 from the field for 21 points, 4 of 7 from 3-point range. This is Victor Oladipo I'm talking about. 2 rebounds, 3 assists. Had just those back-to-back threes in the fourth quarter that were huge. I think he ended up with 10 points in the fourth quarter. Victor Oladipo did. That amazing lob from Duncan Robinson. Like, what were the odds on Duncan
Robinson?
Robinson?
I thought it was Tyler who threw that.
No, it was Duncan Robinson who threw it.
Oh, wow.
Duncan Robinson to Victor Oladipo on the lob. What were the odds that those two would have connected on a lob tonight? Like
0%.
Plus 2,100 on FanDuel. I have no idea what it would have been. Yeah, it was like no odds. Don't exist. Now it's impossible. Won't happen. Wow. Very cool, and very cool to see that kind of explosiveness from that was the most explosive play that Victor Oladipo's had since the initial injury he had probably in Indiana.
Well, I saw watching from home, and I didn't attend tonight's game. the burst was so much more evident than it has been. Like the speed was just back to being, I would go so far as to say elite. Maybe not Russell Westbrook in his prime or De'Aaron Fox now, but not that far off. Going end to end, his speed was so incredible. And the burst from just behind the three-point line to the rim was impressive. He had a couple of drives that wind up, I think, missing good looks at the rim or not getting the foul call that he thought he deserved. But overall, you could really see a much more just energetic, boosted version of the Victor Oladipo that we've seen. And then when he hit that first three-point shot, again, this is something that came across to me. He looked a little bit more confident. And then coupling that with a burst, I knew that he was in for a big game. And he just it looked like he was just much more confident letting go with those 2 3-pointers. Like he did not have a lot of spacing either. It's not like they were contested threes and he just knocked them down confidently.
The first one was a little bit more open, but that second one, he was like off. He had no business taking that shot. And that's the Victor Oladipo experience. I want to hold a little bit of the Victor Oladipo stuff though, because we do have a conversation to be had when we get our listener questions. But in terms of Vic, I think a couple of cookies for him is warranted. You think three, so that gives us 4 left over. So I think
21
3 to
points
Jimmy,
for each of him and Caleb off the bench. I mean, that's huge.
3, and then Jimmy gets 3 for 26 points, 8 of 14 shooting, 9 rebounds, 9 assists. I mean, a near triple double. That's like a LeBron stat line right there. Jimmy Butler is awesome. He did a great job, specifically in that second half, attacking those Atlanta switches. The Hawks are a team. They're long, like on paper, they look like they're probably bigger, but they kind of play small. And Jimmy Butler has just he eats them for lunch like all the time in terms of, hey, let me pick out the Hawk defender that I want to get the switch. Let me get it, and let me just get into that little 6-foot, all elbows and shoulders jump, little soft touch shot that he's got, or get it off the glass there under the basket. Yeah, so
completely unafraid to attack them. Just big night from him.
And then Duncan Robinson, we'll talk about him a little bit more in the next segment, but 14 points, 3 of 4 shooting. With Kevin Love out, Duncan Robinson ended up being the 9th guy. I know that there was some questions. Is it going to be Duncan Robinson, Haywood Highsmith, maybe Omer Yurtseven gets some run? Ultimately, they decided to rest Yurtseven after he played 2 games in Sioux Falls. Haywood Highsmith doesn't get into the rotation, and so it's Duncan Robinson. Again, Spo deciding to go with shooters over defense. That was a conscious decision that he made, and it paid off because Duncan Robinson made 3 really big 3-pointers. The Miami Heat basically swung the game. They went from down 1 to up 6 with 4 straight 3-pointers. Duncan Robinson accounting for one of them off of that Bam Adebayo handoff. We'll talk about that later too as we get to our listener questions. But David, first, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Well, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to numbers of threes drained. Who had predicted that Duncan Robinson would have the big night he did, or that Victor Oladipo would shoot as well, But you can place that bet if you're feeling confident going into the big Cavaliers matchup on Wednesday night. Place your bet on FanDuel. It's easy to place, and it's just a great opportunity. You can have so many more exclusive bets, like the 2x3, 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. Not sure that's an easy bet for Miami, but maybe if you're leaning into Wes's theory regarding the offense getting a boost early on, you might go for that. But FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram, email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. This next question from our listeners comes from KJK, who writes in using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Can we rely on Victor Oladipo's performance to be a regular thing? Also, why does it look like Tyler Herro doesn't really look to score and facilitate lately? Him and Bam in the pick and roll tonight was a sight to see. Let's put a pin in the Tyler Herro conversation because I want to get to that later. But in terms of Victor Oladipo, can we rely on Victor Oladipo's performance now being a regular thing? Because, David, the Victor Oladipo experience is an experience, right? It's a little bit of a roller coaster. It's a little bit of a ride, all right? Sometimes it ends up just being a little bit of a herky-jerky kind of experience, and there's a lot of bumps, and there's a lot of turnovers, and there's a lot of missed shots and not in the flow of the offense. And then sometimes you get this, when you need some productivity off the bench, and Victor Oladipo comes in, and gives you 21 points on 6 of 12 shooting, 4 of 7 from 3-point range, and those back-to-back threes that we mentioned earlier. The explosiveness, though, I think the efficiency is going to come and go every single night. I think that's to be expected. But if he could be explosive and agile and in this physical form, I do wonder if we can maybe start to rely on Victor Oladipo a little bit more regularly going forward.
I don't know, because he did look particularly good physically tonight, but we've seen him still aggressive, still attacking, still taking wild circus shots even from beyond the arc, and the shots just haven't fallen. And that kind of is the point here. It's that he needs to have it all fall for him in order for him to look like the productive player he can be. Offensively, that's the problem, is that he's been so inconsistent up and down. And look, even just a few games ago, we talked about him kind of freelancing to the degree where he was somewhat unplayable, like that, more of a liability than a benefit to have out on the floor. And that's not good. Defensively, we know what he's capable of. He attacks passing lanes. He challenges defensively, good point of attack defense. All those things matter. He's somewhat switchable, although not as effective as, say, Caleb. But, that's okay. It's been good. I wouldn't go so far as to say great defense from him. It's been good overall. But offensively, it's been problematic, exciting. And tonight was actually just a night where was great. It was just really dialed in, and a solid night from him.
I think sometimes you need that. I think I'm okay. I'm okay with the freelancing, because sometimes Miami's offense is just sort of, because I think other people in Miami's offense is swing, bad 3-point shot, move on, get back on defense.
Well,
every once in a while you need a little bit of chaos, and I think Victor
when we talked about that, he was like taking like 30-foot 3-pointers with like 18 seconds left on the shot clock.
That's not
that
great.
kind of thing.
No, yeah, for sure. I'm not saying that Victor Oladipo is what this Heat team needs every single night. I'm just saying that one ingredient of just some chaos, a player who can go ahead and get it. And sometimes Victor Oladipo can be that, like he was tonight, and sometimes he could be a little bit more Russell Westbrook on that kind of side of the spectrum. Yeah. I hate to say it, but sometimes he's kind of closer to that side of the spectrum than he is on whatever it was tonight. So,
no doubt.
Tonight was a good night. Can you count on it going forward? I have no idea.
Let's say that one out of every 3 games, maybe.
If you can get this once a week, that's great. That's great. TZA Mac writes in,
huge boost. I mean, this is a game changer. Like it could swing a series. Like if you're depending on it, Victor Oladipo, you're not going to do. You can't rely on him. However, if you can get a performance like this in game 1 and game 4 of a 7-game series, that's enough to swing it in Miami's favor.
Hypothetically, that's true. TZA Mac writes in, would the closing lineup of Tyler, Victor Oladipo, Caleb Martin, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo be the go-to lineup going into the playoffs? It's been the go-to lineup at end of games so far, but it's also been the go-to lineup at the end of games without Kyle Lowry. And this question comes down to, what does Kyle Lowry look like if and when he does return to the Miami Heat rotation? I will say this. I think in Sharpie, you have Bam, Jimmy, Caleb, Tyler in the closing lineup. It's been Victor Oladipo recently because you haven't been getting great minutes from Gabe Vincent. You haven't been getting great minutes from Max or Duncan defensively, and Spo's going to lean defense in these moments. You're not going to go big, so it doesn't really look like Spo's going to go Kevin Love or Cody Zeller or even like Omer Yurtseven when he comes back. So it's kind of one of these guards, and right now it's been Victor Oladipo, but that could change Wednesday night. I think that 5th spot is just sort of up in the air. It's just been Victor lately.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Gabe, we've seen Gabe have that opportunity before. He struggled, unfortunately, of late. So I think that's why he's not in there. I think to answer the question, I think Spo trusts Gabe and Victor equally, which is not great because both of them are capable of shooting you into a game or shooting you out of it. They both have defensive lapses on occasion, so I think that's basically what you're stuck with. Ultimately, the best version of Kyle Lowry, at least the best version of Kyle Lowry in a Heat uniform, if he comes back nearing that, the spot is his. Basically, that's my feeling.
I don't think that that's even a question. If Victor, if Kyle Lowry comes back looking the best that he's looked in a Heat uniform,
people will question it. Like
if
Kyle
Lowry comes back looking like he did before the injury, then no, maybe it's not his spot. We saw him; he was out of the closing rotation. But if he's if he looks
all in fourth quarters,
if he looks the best like he's had, like he's been in a Heat uniform, then no question he's part. That's the question. It's what kind of Kyle Lowry are you getting when he comes back? And look, even that, just like Victor Oladipo, that can ebb and flow too. Sometimes it could be a good Kyle Lowry physical night. Sometimes it might not be. Our next question comes from Miles, who writes in, something I noticed, Duncan Robinson doesn't move anymore. He used to sprint off screens all the time and would arguably have the most distance covered per game, but now he just stays still and waits for the ball to get swung to him. Also, there aren't any DHOs with him since they want Bam to score. Just some notes. Would love to hear y'all's thoughts. And then this kind of takes us also to the second part of our earlier question. Why does it look like Tyler Herro doesn't really score and facilitate lately? And talking about seeing Tyler and Bam in the pick and roll tonight was a sight to see, according to our listener there. I actually asked Bam about this in the locker room after the game, and here is what he had to say.
3-pointers in the fourth quarter that kind of swung the game there. 2 of them to Duncan and to Tyler were off that handoff directly from you. That has kind of a little bit phased out of the offense, and then you kind of went back to it. Is that a set call thing? Was it a flow thing? I mean, what's that?
Nah, it's just a flow thing. Knowing somebody's tendencies, like I know if Duncan throws it, he's gonna run back. I mean, y'all have seen it for 5 years at this point. So it's kind of, once you, once you get in that rhythm with somebody's tendencies, damn, he walked in. Hey, man. But once you have that type of niche with somebody, I don't think it ever goes away. So like you haven't seen me and Duncan play a lot together, but in the moment of truth.
So
right,
just
two questions there.
Sure.
Sorry.
Whose microphone was it?
Was it? Is it Jimmy who walked in?
So that was my initial thought. I thought Jimmy walked in. Jimmy had already left by that point. It was Tim Reynolds from the Associated Press who walked in, and Bam was joking with him. And then it was our friend Brandon Tobin's microphone that he bumped and then apologized for bumping into. And then shortly after that, Gabe Vincent was trying to get to his close, and he had the entire scrum move over, like,
give the man some room.
Yeah, which obviously, I was not in front of Gabe's locker.
Of course not. You know how to position yourself
for the most part. So I thought that was interesting. And then after that, I asked him about the connection with Tyler too, and how that's been building. And he's, he said that that's been an emphasis in the offense as well. That has phased out of the offense. And I found Bam's the dribble handoff, has been phased out of the offense a little bit. And when I brought up the dribble handoff and Bam kind of smirked, that was to me the giveaway. Like, that's a recognition. Yeah, it has been phased out of the offense, and he would like to get to it a little bit more. But also really cool that it's such muscle memory at this point, especially with Duncan. Like, just knowing, like, I know Duncan's going to throw it, and then once he throws it, he's going to whip around right behind me, and I'm going to drop it back off to him. That kind of stuff is really cool. It would be great to see more variety of that, but the reason we haven't is because Duncan Robinson is the DHO guy, and Duncan Robinson has been out of the rotation largely for the season. And then with Tyler, it's a little bit more pick and roll stuff with Tyler on the ball, with Bam screening for him, and not so much sort of like that pitch and catch stuff that Duncan and Bam do. So
would you expect more minutes for Duncan moving forward? Because I think he showed something tonight, but again, so much of it seems like it's I don't
like, he's been
no Kevin Love there.
9-man.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know whose minutes he would replace. The easy answer is Max, but if Max is good enough to start, in Spo's opinion, he's probably going to get playing time over Duncan regardless. I'd like seeing the offense just looks so much better when you have, to your point earlier, an elite shooter out there. And Duncan is that. Like, the amount of time he needs to release the shot, the fluidity of it, when he's hitting that shot, like, we can't, I know everybody wants to beat up on him for the contract, and I hate that kind of type of conversation. And I know the production has not matched how much he's getting paid. Sure, I get all that. But the offense just looks so much better when Duncan is hitting those shots. And it is beautiful basketball.
It is. And I like the variety that the Heat can get to, because it's been so much just isolation Jimmy, isolation Bam, pick and roll with Bam and Tyler, baseline cut for Caleb. And it's great when it works. But all the things I just listed is the offense. And there's different ways. They get different triggers. They get into different ways. They're using Bam more as a ball handler in the screen and roll a little bit more now, and that's been kind of interesting. But ultimately, what we're really talking about is the same kind of stuff. And the dribble handoff thing has really fallen off because nobody can really replicate it the way that Duncan does with Bam. And so, yeah, if you want to introduce more variety and to get back to our initial thing of if you're going to start tilting this thing more towards the offense, willingly sacrificing some defense, even if the Heat won't admit that, then maybe Duncan does make sense to add that kind of variety and add that kind of spacing. Because I'm telling you, man, like even after they made those 4 3-pointers that swung the game, and then it was Jimmy Butler who kind of closed things out for him. Jimmy was operating in so much more space than we have seen him operate in quite a while. He was going like one-on-one at times against. When was the last time we saw Jimmy go one-on-one in the paint? Like it's been a minute, like without a defensive breakdown. Atlanta was willingly covering Miami shooters and saying, I guess we got to go one-on-one with Jimmy until he gets 2 dribbles in, and then we'll start clogging the paint. But, yeah, I'm with you. It would be nice to see that. I just don't know whose minutes he takes. I think what they're hoping is that Kevin Love eventually starts making these threes, and he becomes kind of that Duncan Robinson part of the offense, even though you're still not going to get to that dribble handoff stuff the way that you do with Duncan.
He's a catch and shoot player.
So maybe it's Max. Maybe it's Gabe. I don't know. And like once Kyle Lowry comes back, you can maybe you don't need a real backup point guard anymore. And so maybe
big X factor.
It could be. It could be something to monitor, for sure. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. If you haven't yet and you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. It's so easy.
Close.
Just do that. So close. It's right there.
We're at 6K. We're right there. Like we just want to get to 6K before the playoffs.
We want 20K before the playoffs. Get us there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, if you're listening on the podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe there, follow as well.
Subscribe
and now
everywhere.
Make your second listen game to game. That's right. Subscribe everywhere. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.